Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
There's no problem explaining the evolution of deception. There are many, many ways in which me lying to you can benefit me, especially and in some cases only if you don't detect it or are unable to punish me if you do detect it. Deception is widespread in nature at all levels. Viruses and bacteria deceive our immune system and our body to get inside us and so forth and so on. So that's not the problem. That's a trivial functional problem. But why on earth would we practice self-deception? One way to think of self-deception is that we're simultaneously storing true and false information in our mind, but with a bias, namely we're putting the true information in the unconscious part of our brain and the false information in the conscious part. But you have then an interesting functional question. You would think if there was some reason for us to store the two, you would store the false information in the unconscious somewhere down in the basement, out of sight, and you would keep the true information in the conscious mind so as to link up with whatever are the benefits of consciousness. Now, the idea, essential idea, was that this is all oriented towards an observer. And if you want to hide the truth from another organism, i.e. lie to it or deceive it, then stick it in the unconscious. It's much harder for you to read unconscious components of my behavior than to read the conscious mind that you can see in front of you running my mouth, my eyes, and so on. Actually not running it, but going along side by side with it. Now, one little side point. It's not necessarily true that there's any true information stored. There are cases now, we're pretty sure, where the truth is shunted aside so quickly it doesn't even enter the brain, and you've got and the unconscious mind is producing a false conscious sense of knowledge. There are two main ways of fooling each other. One is, let's assume now that I'm lying to you about something you actually care about. Better yet, you know me and are studying me up close. You can pay attention to my eye movements. People, when they deceive, often look away, and it's not nervousness so much as cognitive load. It's hard to concentrate on the lie. It's cognitively demanding. You have to create a falsehood, cannot contradict anything the other person knows already or is likely to know, and you have to remember it later. Likewise, if you come to the key word in a lie, your voice is apt to go up. And that's because of stress, and any kind of tightening of your body in response to stress automatically raises the voice. So the point is, if I first deceive myself and am unconscious of the deception I practice, then those avenues for detecting my deception are unavailable to you. There are also linguistic characteristics. Pausing more at certain places. Liars tend to distance themselves from the lie by talking about they, we, and whatnot, but avoiding I. If we have a positive effect on others, we tell the story with I did this, I did that, and then benefits rain down on all of you. If it's the other way around, then we take a passive voice, things happened, then that happened, then this. And you suffered some cost. And to me, the classic example was a man that ran into a telephone pole in San Francisco. And as recorded in the police report, his description was as follows. The pole was approaching my car when I attempted to swerve out of the way, and it struck me. So in terms of physics, perfectly legitimate description of the interaction, but it rather shifts responsibility to the telephone pole. Now let me turn to this other business of self-inflation. We're better looking than we really are. We're smarter. We're more useful to others. We're more moral. Now, if you ask people about looks, you get the same kind of thing. Roughly 70% of us will say we're in the top half of our population for good looks. Now, the question is that just our mouth talking or our mouth flabbing, as they would say in Jamaica? Or do we, in a deeper sense, believe that we're better looking than we are? Now, the following experiment I think you'll enjoy because it shows that something deeper is going on. So here's what they did. This is Epley in the middle, Mr. Epley, and this is Ms. Whitchurch. Epley and Whitchurch, 2008. What they've done there, the actual there in the front, they've stripped her of her hair, and now they've morphed her towards a good-looking face, which is the average of 15 good-looking women picked out of a sample of 60. And you add more and more percentage until this is half and half. Now you morph her to someone that has craniofacial syndrome, which, as you can see, kind of pulls your face down and makes you uglier. Okay? Now they do the same thing with Epley. He gets better looking here, and he gets less good looking in this direction. Now here's the game they play, and they play it with you. They put you in front of a computer screen. They've taken your own photo of you. They've morphed it to 20% better looking, 20% uglier. Now, blingo, suddenly you see 12 faces there matched for your age and sex, and one of them is you. And your job is simply, as fast as you can, spot yourself, hit this button when you've spotted yourself, and then point to that picture. They run it a number of times, of course, but some of the times it's real you, some of the times it's 20% better looking you, and some of the times it's 20% uglier you. So which do you see first? Well, you see better looking you first. It takes 5% longer for you to see the real you, and it takes 5% longer still to see the ugly you. So we have an internal bias to spotting ourselves as being better looking. Now, let me show you another piece of work that's moved beyond the old curse of social psychology, which is it used to be based entirely on questionnaire behavior. So now here's an interesting thing. There are two ways in which you can write the letter E on your forehead. You can do it like this pleasant fellow, so that you can read the E. Or you can do it like this somewhat more malevolent-looking creature who writes it so that as I look through it, I see E, but you see it backwards. Now, what's interesting is that you can manipulate a person's tendency to write the letter. What they do is they say, do this 5 times and then right away write the letter E. The reason why they do this is they don't want you thinking about it. They want as quick a natural response. After the 5th one, just write the E up there. Now, they have these little tricks in which they can make you feel more powerful or less powerful. These are temporarily induced states, but they're strong enough to produce an actual effect. And here's what you find. If you're induced to feel that you have low power, there's only about 13% of you that write a self-focused E. But if you feel powerful, it jumps up to about 33%. And there are a series of things that go with it. If you're induced to feel powerful, you recognize the emotional content of facial expressions less well. They'll show you pictures for just a second and say, and you've got to characterize, was the person happy, smiling, sad, whatever. You do it less well when you're made to feel powerful, better when you're made to feel powerless. You remember the information better when you're made to feel powerless. And if you're made to feel powerful, you have a harder time taking the viewpoint of someone else in a simulated circumstance. I want to combine this fact with another fact. Men tend to be more overconfident than women do. Both of us tend to be overconfident in various circumstances, but it's more a male disease. So powerful men are both overconfident and ignorant. That's an unfortunate combination. And here's a grotesque example of it, or at least an example that had grotesque effects. How early does deception start? It starts early. By 6 months of age, children are already using crying out of context, so to speak. Not when they actually need something or are actually in pain, but simply to manipulate. It actually begins in utero. The baby, I'm talking to the women in the audience, of course, starts lying to you, and during the last 3 months, it's inside you. First of all, it takes over control of your blood sugar level, raising it, advantageous to it. It raises your blood pressure, again advantageous to it, and it causes your blood to be distributed around it. It withdraws it from your legs and your feet, and all of this increases investment in it. Well, maybe you could say, oh, well, this is the way mom wants it. The child knows better in utero what it needs than mom does, so she lets the child say. Now, here's why we doubt that simple explanation. The way the child controls these variables in the mother is to dump into her bloodstream either the same chemical that she uses to control those variables at all other times, or close chemical mimics. But here's the catch. It dumps those chemicals in her bloodstream at 1,000 times the level that she herself uses. Why is this? We believe it's because of a long coevolutionary struggle. So we imagine that initially the mother controlled those variables, then the offspring tosses in some extra hormones, which benefits it, and then the mother becomes inert to it. And so the offspring ups it, and the mother becomes inert to it. And finally, you're at 1,000 times the titer, still gaining the benefit, but the mother about to make an adjustment, perhaps. So there's an argument going on inside because we know it's not to the mother's benefit to give the offspring everything the offspring would like. The mother has to partition her resources between her other offspring, past, present, and future. The offspring has an interest in them, it's related to them, but it's not nearly as related to them as it is to itself, while the mother's equally related to them. Now here's a very important finding. The smarter your child is, the more your child lies. And the reason why this is important is that, again, intellectuals especially are tempted to believe the opposite. Ain't we smarter? So we practice less self-deception. We got more self-insight. I'm very doubtful about that. The good evidence, which doesn't yet come to adults and only applies to deception, shows that intelligence and deception are positively correlated. So here are 4-year-old children, and they've been given a little cognitive test that allows you to rank them. Very bright children here and somewhat slow children here. And here's how often they lie in the following situation. The child is sitting there like Mr. Osen, and I come around there, and there's a box behind him, and I open the box, and I stick something in it, and I close the box, and then I say, don't look in the box. Do not look in the box. I'm leaving the room for a couple of minutes. Don't look in the box. Fine. I leave the room. I watch him through a one-way window, and most children open the box. Then I come back inside and I say, did you open the box? And most children say no. But the degree to which they say no is dependent on how well they do on this test. If you're a smart child, you lie 100% of the time. If you're slow, it's about 65% of the time. The same tendency correlates with a series of perinatal measures of the health of the child. And there's a series of these, and I forget them, and it's a weighted thing, but it's their health at birth. And the healthier they are at birth, the more they'll lie later on this test. There's a chapter on the immunology of self-deception, and when I started working seriously on this after I'd finished my genetics book, I didn't know nothing about it. I didn't think there was anything to do with immunology and self-deception. Turns out there are many important connections. There's a very strong correlation between the degree to which you're in the closet and your immune function and your health. And it can be summarized by saying the more you're in the closet, the worse for you. Living a lie is hard on your immune system. If you divide them into the upper half and the lower half of closetness, you suffer cancer more if you're in the closet, and bronchitis more. If you're HIV positive, you transit into AIDS quicker and die 20% quicker. So this is by no means a trivial topic in our lives, either at the national or international level. Trust me, as an American, I can barely read the newspaper in the morning, the amount of lies and self-deception washing over me. Self-deception begins pleasantly enough, but often ends badly.